Kia ora tātou, hola, bonjour, yeah, g'day. And if Jude was here, I'd say hello, love. But wait, there's more. So as usual, there is a disclaimer that the following are my random thoughts and collated information, limited by my current understanding. I'm quite open to being wrong, so you've got to consider and debate with your own discernment. And as we go through the info, you're going to notice very soon a lot of the same concepts and references from previous talks and the synchronicities. Even a slide or two might be similar. And I think my new descriptor for myself, thank you Carol, is a little fatty thing. I'm going to use that. Okay. So the phrase, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, is attributed to the philosopher Aristotle, although apparently what he said was more like, what is the reason for a unity, oneness? For however many things have a plurality of parts and are not merely a complete aggregate, but instead some kind of a whole beyond its parts. And I also want to mention that Jude made me think with the breath about the yuga cycles. I thought that was an important link. And another familiar term, as was mentioned, is mind, body, spirit, and World of Heart was more specifically in the mix. So a single thing that is made up of many separate parts can be more important, more useful, more beautiful, or in some way greater than all of the separate parts all on their own. For example, if you take all the parts of a watch and lay them out on the table, they are not going to tell you the time the way a watch does, that it has been assembled. If you take all of the pieces of a flower and lay them down on the ground, they are not going to grow and flourish the way a whole flower through the whole process does. How about a cake? Do you feel like a mouthful of raw flour? I think a piece of completed cake might be preferable. So it can also be applied to human systems. So when many people work together on a problem, they can often achieve more than they would do if each person worked individually. We'll look at some more examples. Who has made up a flat pack and survived with their patience and higher level behaviour intact? And have you found that missing screw yet? Or worked out where that extra screw you ended up with is supposed to go? We'll move on to a car. What happens if the engine is missing a bit? It might not operate fully or safely. And if you're like me and never had a car that is absolutely new and in peak optimum condition, you probably wouldn't have any idea about what you're missing out on. Because for me, the well-used version is my norm and view of what a car is. So I can't quite imagine the experience of a pristine, smoothly, fully working vehicle. That takes us into our bodies. How about our bodies made up of so many parts? And a reminder of as above, so below. Physicist Richard Feynman once wrote in a poem, "My mortal body is indeed a universe of atoms, but I am just an atom in the universe itself." Guess what we're going to talk about now? Vagus nerve in your body is like a superhighway for communication between your brain and various organs. It's one of the longest nerves in your body, stretching from your brainstem all the way down to your abdomen. Think of it as a major player in your autonomic nervous system, which controls things that you don't have to think about, like your heart rate, digestion, breathing. When you take a deep breath, feel your heartbeat, or even swallow your food, that's the vagus nerve doing its job, as Carol mentioned. It helps keep everything running smoothly by sending signals back and forth, ensuring your body responds appropriately to different situations, like getting up and talking in front of people. But the vagus nerve does more than just manage basic functions. It also plays a role in your mood and overall sense of well-being. Stimulating the vagus nerve, as we've already heard in previous talks, whether through activities like deep breathing and meditation, can help reduce stress and promote relaxation. Our body, apparently, contains about 37 trillion cells, with around 200 different types of cells, each with a specific function. For example, skin cells produce melanin, which determines skin colour, while nerve cells send electrical signals throughout the body, and cells group together to form tissues, which then make up organs. Now here's a fun fact. Back to bacteria, thank you, Wendy, and also I think it might have been Donald that mentioned it. Oh, Jude mentioned it. The human body contains trillions of bacteria, so Google tells me, which outnumber human cells 10 to 1. Humans acquire bacteria during birth and the first few years of life. And bacteria play a vital role in human health, helping with digestion, growth, and regulating moods. They also protect the body from invaders. Molecular biologist Bonnie Bassler studies how bacteria can communicate with one another through chemical signals to act as a unit. She discovered that bacteria talk to each other using a chemical language that lets them coordinate defence and mount attacks. I highly recommend her TED talk, How Bacteria Talk, on YouTube. I found some really clear theosophical concepts in there. As we've just heard in the last talk, scientists have relatively recently discovered the existence of a bidirectional pathway linking the brain with bacteria living in the human gut. This pathway, known as the microbiota gut-brain axis, suggests that gut microbes can influence critical processes in the body, including human behaviour. The study authors hypothesised that the composition of the gut microbiome and its metabolites might also influence the cognitive regulation of behaviour and mood. And again, Carol mentioned about serotonin. So serotonin is a chemical messenger that affects mood, sleep, memory, a whole lot of other stuff. And for decades, no one gave much thought to serotonin outside the brain, yet there's a lot of it sitting right inside the intestine. In fact, as Carol mentioned, over 90%, or apparently around that mark, of our body's serotonin is in the gut. And they found that targeting cells in the gut for depression and anxiety work better than targeting brain cells. As well as the human physical biology, there are our emotions. Much of our human behaviour is driven by emotion rather than reason. Emotions compel human beings to take action. However, this can become more obviously physical and dense in our expression of them, but they're created much sooner than when we show them, and they become apparent to most others. So there's a whole lot happening in that process way before we generally pick it up. Of course, we have information available in theosophical books regarding thought forms, and it's important to discern that the manifested expression of a perceived emotion is not necessarily directly linked to its cause or initial creation. Brain research supports the existence of at least 7 primary process or basic emotional systems: seeking, rage, those are separate words, not together, fear, lust, care, grief, which used to be labelled panic, and play, which are concentrated in ancient subcortical regions of all mammalian brains. The way we choose to treat each other is usually based on our personal emotional drivers and meeting a need that we may not be cognitively or even subconsciously aware of at the time. Some studies consider that there are 8 fundamental emotional drivers and motivators, and you'll note that love is included in there. So each of these is based on a human psycho-emotional need developed through environmental factors such as family, culture, and stage in life. And I think that Shona referenced some of those influences and linking in what people are able to do in their lives and some containment. While each of these drivers is present in each individual, they do not have equal importance. They're also achieved in different ways by different individuals in different environments. Each individual has a different order of importance for these 8 drivers, and we're constantly filling these as emotional gratifications, sometimes in positive ways, sometimes in neutral ways, sometimes in negative ways, but we are constantly filling them. The ranking of these drivers can change with time, based on our environment, our experiences, and especially our trauma or strong relationships. And they're also affected by loss. These drivers can be cultivated either positively or negatively by our environment, culture, parents, teachers, our peers. And how did the heart become synonymous with that big emotion of love? And how do we manage to turn even that into a cash flow motivated experience? Take note, February the 14th, Valentine's Day. The ancient Egyptians considered the heart to be the most important organ in the body and the key to a successful afterlife. The heart was the source of intellect, memory, and character, thought to record the good and bad aspects of a person's life, and associated with emotions and love. The heart was so sacred that it was left in the body during the mummification process, so it could be judged in the afterlife, noting that the brain was removed because the Egyptians thought that the heart was the centre of thought, therefore the brain was of little value. Then we have Thoth, T-H-O-T-H, T-H-O-T-H. The Egyptian god of the moon, wisdom, knowledge, writing, hieroglyphics, science, magic, art and judgment, busy being, who was an advisor and mediator to the gods. He helped the funerary deities as a messenger and a bookkeeper for them. He was responsible for recording the verdict of the heart-weighing ceremony that determined if the person was able to continue on to the afterlife. If the person's heart, spirit, balanced with Maat's feather of truth, they passed. However, if the heart was heavier than the feather, then the person did not pass. Thoth provided guidance for the deities and regulated common everyday complaints and created new laws. Thoth suggested that if a problem couldn't be solved, then a group should get together as an assembly to discuss it. As Donna referred to, and this image for the 3rd time, always, so it's now printed. So modern studies of the heart have been undertaken by HeartMath Institute, finding that the magnetic field produced by the heart is more than 100 times greater than the field generated by the brain in strength. The heart's magnetic field is the strongest rhythmic field produced by the human body, and not only envelops every cell of the body, but also extends out in all directions into the space around us. And as Donna mentioned, it can be measured by sensitive, what they call magnetometers. And research conducted at HeartMath Institute suggests the heart's field is an important carrier of information. So we're always radiating. We choose how and why our energy emanates. The heart and brain work together to create emotions. The heart sends signals to the brain, and the brain responds in often complex ways. Emotions arise from the activation of specialised neuronal populations in several parts of the cerebral cortex, including the amygdala, which then creates the feelings you experience in your body. So, our emotion is a personal interpretation and a perception of information. I quite like the idea of emotional sobriety to drop the drama and mass hysteria and histrionics that can often come into play. However, the emotion which comes with intensely beautiful connection is literally out of this world. We've covered quite a bit regarding parts or aspects of our human body because there can be a danger and seeing the bigger picture overview of life without understanding its defined parts and how they, which is we, work best together. Expanding our view and joining some dots is helpful to understand the connections. Then we know better how to use them. In their teachings, Annie Besant and I.K. Taimni, theosophists, among others, have shared their insights on the awakening of Buddha through higher emotions, as well as the value of devotion and the spiritual path. They emphasise how the conscious cultivation of these higher states of being will have profound implications in our path of unfoldment and in the way we see and experience the challenges of life. In the teachings of theosophy, progress in the spiritual path is marked by the redirection of energy from the personal self to the all-encompassing life. The same force that in early stages is used for personal gain is gradually turned towards serving the common self with a capital S in all, present in all. This shift is facilitated by the emergence of emotions and thoughts of a subtler vibration, as well as our willingness to enable their permanence. Pablo Sender commented, "The emotional dimension is an intrinsic part of being human. However, when we're caught up in conflicting emotions, life can become very difficult and stressful. Theosophically, the way to deal with this problem is not to annihilate emotions, but rather to harmonise them. A healthy emotional nature adds richness and depth to the life of a person, and he or she becomes a positive influence." And Clara Codd said, "Our controlled and clear thought and our pure selfless emotion, these are the two wings with which we fly." The voice of the silence goes on to say, "But even ignorance is better than head learning with no soul wisdom to illuminate and guide it. For mind is like a mirror, it gathers dust while it reflects. Seek, O beginner, to blend thy mind and soul within thy body, the shrine of thy sensations. Seek in the impersonal for the eternal man." And this is how HPB describes the Antakarana, like a bridge. It is manas purified of egotism, pure, selfless, aspiring thought. And from Master DK, Joelko, "The real impersonality is perfect love." In Dimensions of Consciousness, Dora van Gelder Koens notes that the mind can also become warped and exert an egotistic, negative and harmful effect upon the emotional life. It can justify our prejudices and pervert the truth, thus becoming, as HPB put it, the slayer of the real. As has already been mentioned here, growth is the thing that can be facilitated by stress, so stress helps growth. I think for some of us that growth is being wider. Happens in all sorts of ways. And I guess that's one way of creating a bigger field. So some things to consider, and Carol earlier this morning alluded to this, things that you can find helpful when you're trying to manage intense situations and feelings. How do you centre yourself? And everyone will have something that fits for them. Nature, fantastic thing to be able to connect with. Breathing, meditation. For me, actually, I'll share that my tattoos are a touchstone for me. Each thing brings me to a reminder of a concept or something that is centering. And I also try and remind myself, do I know their story, which is really our story, but when any situation comes up, how can I presume to know all of the information involved for that person's situation that I might just be reacting to? In my view, we know we're on the path to true change when we choose to value the positive aspects of ourselves, as well as acknowledging the opportunities to develop. rather than just default to being dismissive or undermining of each other. Becoming more cognitively aware of our emotional drivers and taking responsibility for their direction and energetic power can be helped with meditation, being less self-absorbed, stepping out of the grasp of emotion, and having a genuine care for our self, and perceived others. And this would be getting closer to what I have termed intelligent love. The necessary tool for connection and expanded insight is open and critical thinking, removing the fetter of personal attachment, and having genuine kindness as your motivation. Being kind is a choice, so is being unkind. It seems to be a very human tendency to make personal judgments as to how we think someone else should be or act or look. Maybe it's easier to focus on the diversion rather than own our own stuff. And we do tend to be influenced by what things look like on the outside, things and people, rather than recognise the heart and all of who someone is. We can see what we're looking for. And the irony is that appearance changes. Generally, we have a tendency to apply duality. Things are either this or that. In reality, there's an unlimited option to be all of this and that. What you decide matters, is determined by your perception of the moment and which particular aspect you're focusing on more to meet the need of your emotional driver of the moment, often unconsciously and losing sight of the bigger picture. And some well-known examples of duality are the two wolf story that I won't go into because I'm sure you're all familiar with it. Well, guess what? It's the same wolf. Look after all of it. And has somewhat of a familiarity to yin-yang with its seemingly separate opposites, which are all needed to make the true whole. And it's clearly depicted in yin-yang that it's not completely separate, with a piece of each being part of each in the two dots. Now you come across all these personality tests. What do you see first? And then it'll tell you about you based on what you see first. And so we're encouraged to develop an either-or context. Choose one. It's very handy to perpetuate unnecessary conflict with that behaviour. How about those who have the mix? I'm looking forward to when we do not feel the need to steer to division, but rather we simply acknowledge the current aspects while maintaining an openness for what we don't know yet or understand fully. The context of left or right brain tendency may look very different then with that higher thinking. Let's gear for whole. You can discuss with each other which one you are if you want to after the talk. There's a guy called Robert Edward Grant. He's a really interesting person. He's a musician, mathematician, artist, sound-based health. He's also done TEDx talks. And I know he is somebody working in the same field with Jude Curran. Some of the things he said: I believe we're moving rapidly to a new paradigm. Duality will change. We're here to learn how to feel and experience the emotional states. Geometry is the sound that we see with our eyes. I consider myself a human being who is learning the language of the universe. We see the universe around us in the terms that we ourselves are already, rather than as they truly are. If we could start to recognise that we are not separate from the universe, but rather a part of the universe, we are the universe. Most people don't recognise fully who they are. Once we can accept others fully, we can accept ourselves. It's not just black and white colour, there's a whole spectrum. See yourself and all with the whole spectrum. Now the next 3 slides are from Adyar Pamphlets number 1, titled Emotion, Intellect and Spirituality by Annie Besant. And it was written in March 1911. And I really resonated with it and wanted to present it in its entirety. So it runs in sequence with the next 3 slides, and I will read them out. There is but one life, no matter how different may be its manifestations. It is the essential consciousness, and that unit is the root of our being. Everything that is in us comes forth from that, and we should think of it as a great stream of outpouring energy, which changes its appearance and its colour as it clothes itself in the matter of one plane after another, the colour being lent by the plane, the colouring matter, we might almost call it. While the essential life remains the same, remember always that that essential life draws into itself the colouring characteristic of any plane, so that when the evolution through all the planes is completed, the Atma has taken up the colouring of every plane, and is therefore very different at the conclusion of the human evolution from the Atma at the beginning of that evolution. A point which we are very often apt to lose sight of, and so to get a sort of despairing idea and to say of the whole of evolution, if it be Atma at the beginning and Atma at the end, what has been done through all this pilgrimage? While Atma may shake off all the matter of the planes, the colouring obtained through that matter is not lost. So where does that take us? There is a saying, you can't see the wood for the trees. As our awareness of our part in the whole picture and our connections with all change, so does our perspective. While needing to be aware of and understand the components of all, tunnel vision also changes our perspective. We can so easily get drawn into our choice of any number of rabbit holes of information and emotions. While exploring is about being open and curious, getting distracted and fixated, dogmatic in one small pixelated aspect, can be the absolute contrary behaviour to expansion and unfolding. You have a constant array of ideas and imposed views available to you to get drawn into, depending on what personal need of the moment that's meeting for you. There are some theories which consider the possibility that the global population will become more homogeneous in the future, with differences in race and body type becoming blurred in an increasingly connected world population. And this will make our current intensity regarding perceived boundaried differences and imposing a view of how we think things or people should be seem rather unrefined and ignorant. That's just my opinion.
Is that what homogeneous means?
Homogeneous means the same, bringing similar. Yeah. It is important to observe the whole as well as its particular aspects, being a part of it, understanding as much as we can. Understanding more of the whole can reduce distractions and diversions. I guess this is a benefit of reincarnation. Each time we recognise a familiar colour as a marker. We also need to appreciate context, and if we have understood all the information. Who's heard of Anita Moorjani? Hafid, third name. So she wrote a piece called Only a Flashlight, How Do You See Reality? And I'm going to read that out. You may wish to close your eyes. Imagine, if you will, a huge dark warehouse. You live there with only one flashlight to see by. Everything you know about what's contained within this enormous space is what you've seen by the beam of one small flashlight. Whenever you want to look for something, you may or you may not find it. But that doesn't mean the thing doesn't exist. It's there, but you just haven't shone your light on it. And even when you do, the object you see, may be difficult to make out. You may get a fairly clear idea of it, but often you're left wondering. You can only see what your light is focused on and only identify that which you already know. That is what physical life is like. We're only aware of what we focus our senses on at any given time, and we can only understand what is already familiar. Next, imagine that one day someone flicks on a switch. There, for the first time, in a sudden burst of brilliance and sound and colour, you can see the entire warehouse, and it's nothing like anything you'd ever imagined. The vastness, complexity, depth and breadth of everything going on around you is almost overwhelming. You can't see all the way to the end of the space, and you know there's more to it than what you can take in from this torrent that's tantalising your senses and emotions. But you do get a strong feeling that you're actually part of something alive, infinite, and altogether fantastic. That you are a part of a large and unfolding tapestry that goes beyond sight and sound. You understand that what you used to think was your reality was, in fact, hardly a speck within the vast wonder that surrounds you. You can see how all the various parts are interrelated, how they all play off each other, how everything fits, and even the objects you were aware of have an entirely new context. So thank you to Anita Morjani for creating and sharing that piece. So the challenge is, are we truly seeing and recognising all of ourselves with each other in this aspect of an experience, which is being human, or are we still tightly holding on to a controlled grasp of the flashlight and dismissing what we prefer not to look at or acknowledge to maintain our own chosen narrative? And I'm encouraging us to embrace wholeness by being aware that it is our choice to be holding and directing the flashlight and to find the light switch. This is how our hearts and minds and bodies and spirit can expand and unfold together to better serve and guide us, so we can better serve as Gaians and as cosmic citizens. So, back to, but wait, there's more? There certainly is. Thank you for your attention and enjoy the rest of convention.